I may not know what a bad bunny is, but I know what a bad football team looks like. I may not know what a bad omen looks like, but I know what a bunch of injuries popping up could look like. So does that mean Houston might have enough injuries to give Oklahoma State a chance? Yeah, I'm saying there might be a chance.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, y'all. Hello, all. We have a fun one today. We have a crossover with Oklahoma State versus Houston about to unfold. This might even need to be labeled as the Injury Bug Bowl. Hopefully, Houston has some injuries that are pretty close to some Oklahoma State's injuries, so we at least can say we have an opportunity. But of course, we're going to bring in Parker Ainsworth, the beast down in the Houston Coug area. Parker, hey, how are we feeling today, brother man?
We're doing okay.
Oh, well, I just decided to boot you there.
Yeah, we were doing okay.
We
No,
were,
we'll,
yes.
we'll talk about injuries and stuff like that. But excited to. I don't mean to be too negative about the Oklahoma State Cowboys, but hopefully get back on track this weekend after a thorough beatdown a week ago. So,
Well, there's not a ton of positivity, but I'm going to try to inject at least a little bit throughout the course of this day. Before we get into the meat and tater section, ladies and gentlemen, today's episode is partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure that you get squared away today with the bee's knees for all of your betting needs, which is FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 back in bonus bets to use all across the app. Make sure that you go download the FanDuel app today. All right, Parker. So Oklahoma State began the season with a lot of hope, and Haas Haney gave us that hope. And then Haas Haney decided to break his foot, taking away some of that hope. We tried to rally around Zane Flores, but it wasn't exactly working. Now he's also injured and out for this ball game. So Oklahoma State might have a plethora of backups upon backups upon backups. We might even just go Wildcat all day. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I do know that Connor Weigman went down with an injury because Texas Tech's defense is that good. Do you think that Connor Weigman is going to be an individual that Oklahoma State needs to be concerned with? Is he going to start the game? Do you think there's some gamesmanship happening here? What do you think?
you know, I think that he's had a pretty good year where he's gotten a little bit better each week, and then he ran into a pretty talented front four at Texas Tech as a quarterback. That's never fun. For the folks at Oklahoma State that maybe hadn't followed it, he left in the late second quarter, walked back to the locker room with a trainer, did not walk back out on Saturday night. They initially told the press it was a upper body injury. That night he would not return. Monday morning at the presser, they said he was in concussion protocol, but quarterbacks don't get hit at practice, so I should probably also put that grain of salt in it. But he did practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, and spoke a little bit to the local folks there at practice. Yeah, I said he's excited to get back out there with his guys and hopes he keeps to continue progressing. Everyone acts like he'll be good to go on Saturday. Obviously, something went wrong, Cody. They're being pretty concussion protocol. They didn't even say it was an outright concussion. They said he was in concussion protocol, right? Which I assume is a concussion, but I guess you could just be in the protocol just because. I think that something happened Saturday. I think they expect him to play this upcoming Saturday, though, with whatever it was.
Well, that dashes a little bit of my optimism. All right, you're taking some of my orange Kool-Aid hopium that I plan on injecting. You're taking some of that away. But nonetheless, you still have had some other injuries, right? You've had some offensive linemen that have had some difficulties, including potentially your best offensive lineman. And then on the defensive side of the ball, how's Houston looking in that department?
Yeah, so David Ndukwe went down against Colorado, I want to say, week 3. Colorado week 3, and dislocated kneecap, really ugly. And he was, for Pro Football Focus scores, had been playing the best on your offensive line thus far this year. He was playing left tackle, but they kind of had 3 guys that are rotating through those 2 spots, and now they're down to the 2 guys. And honestly, you kind of would have killed for anyone else out there. It felt like at times on Saturday against Texas Tech last weekend, and so it kind of highlighted that gap. I do think that part of that was, how talented that Tech front 4 is that I keep mentioning, but Dalton Merriman at right tackle has has things he's good at, things he's not good at, and at tackle, you kind of want them to be good at all the things, Cody.
Yeah.
So it hurts a little bit. But I'm intrigued by your roster because Cody, it's not just injuries. I feel like the more I look at this Oklahoma State roster, the more new names that I see popping up every week since the Gundy news.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of it is the injury bug, right? You know, we're missing wide receivers, DeJuan Lofton, Talon Shetron, Io Shotomite King, Christian Fitzpatrick, offensive lineman, Jalen Beckley, Louis Canepa, Markel Samuel, Tyler Brumfield. We're missing multiple wide receivers. We're missing multiple defensive ends. And here's the biggest kicker of all of it is we started this season, Parker, with 7 tight ends. We are down to 1. We have 1 tight end. So much so that I've heard that we have some defensive guys that are filling in as we speak this week in practice. Are they going to take the game as a tight end, or is it more of a scout team role? I'm not 100% sure. But the ineffectiveness that we've had in running the ball is partially to do with the fact that our O-line can't open holes. So we had to utilize tight ends to help get some of those holes, or at least get to the second level. And without the tight ends, it's going to be very, very difficult. But what you noticed is beneficial, in my opinion, is now we're seeing more of the guys that are bought into the Cowboy culture. They bleed orange. They care more about the name on the front of the jersey than the name on the back of the jersey. And we discussed this even on previous squad shows. We've seen a full transfer portal roster be an absolute disaster, i.e. Florida State. But just a year prior to that, Florida State also had a transfer riddled roster, and they won 13 ball games. So we've seen it go well. We've seen it go horrendously. Unfortunately for Oklahoma State, we invested fairly heavily in the NIL, and we just spent money on the wrong dudes. And those were typically the dudes that were playing the most the first few weeks. So now you're seeing some of the guys that don't make a whole lot of NIL, but they are here for the right reasons, and they do care about being portions of the foundational pieces moving forward. And I'm okay with that, buddy. I want to see effort, right? I want to see players that clearly do give a crap. Maybe they're not as strong or as fast as the guys that we paid a bunch of money to be here. But if there's not buy-in to the team, then there's probably not going to be a lot of buy-in to the schematics of it. And you've seen that defensively. We have players trying to do superhuman stuff. The problem is they're not athletically inclined enough to do the superhuman stuff. So it just causes a bunch of chaos. Now, against Arizona, you saw a lot of these backups, right, that hadn't played all season. And what do? We only allow 45 yards rushing to a pretty talented Ishmael Mahdi and, in my opinion, a very athletic Noah Fafita. Did we get absolutely torched in the back end? Sure. Yes, we did. But we finally had something positive to reflect on when it came to shutting down the run. And I think that it's a direct reflection of the guys playing that care more about Oklahoma State than they do their NIL.
So I think the obvious answer to this question is either going to be Haas Haney or Zane Flores, the 2 quarterbacks that have started games. So I kind of want to take them out of it. Who are you feeling like you're missing the most? Is it someone in the back end, outside of the quarterback spot? Is it a guard, a tackle? Because you've had so many guys start the season as players that are not playing for you anymore. Is there one hole you're like, man, that one really hurt when that one walked away?
From an injury perspective, yeah, Markel Samuel, the starting left tackle, you know, he was probably the best acquisition on the offensive line in the offseason, and he was showing a lot of promise, and he was able to protect Zane Flores' backside. Now that he's out, we're having a lot of difficulty in that department, which is not good for Zane Flores, who's trying to find some confidence, but it's really difficult when you know your offensive linemen are banged up. And then as far as the portal is discussed, we've had both David Kabongo and today another tight end, Josh Ford, entered the portal. Josh Ford does hurt the heart because he's a Stillwater, Oklahoma guy that, loves Oklahoma State. But he's also very, very connected to Mike Gundy and the Gundy family because he played with some of the Gundys at Stillwater High School. So unfortunately, that one does make sense. But it does put us in a very precarious situation right now where we don't have any freaking tight ends. And we don't necessarily have any wide receivers big enough to just scoot them over to like an H-back style of role either. So now we have to rely on some defensive ends that used to play tight end in high school, having at least the ability to help us block, to give whomever is going to be playing quarterback enough time to at least push the ball downfield to some degree.
Well, I'm intrigued by your quarterback spot, actually, and I kind of want to talk about that in the second segment, though, when we get to players to watch, Cody, because
I like it.
it may be the high school coach in me, but there's some fun stuff going on there, weirdly.
I agree with you. And you know what? That's a perfect segue. It's like you're the consummate professional of the bunch, and I greatly appreciate it. So, yes, we do have some yelling to do at the fine folks out here before we get to segment 2. Supply House is where you need to go for anything that you need done around the house. Whether you're opening the next presentation for your guests, the new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see the parts on your doorstep as early as tomorrow. Over 280,000 parts, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items to choose from the most trusted brands in the business. The real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects into the future, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side protected. If you need parts for a project fast, Supply House has next-day delivery. If you want to talk about a game changer, the Parts Finder tools and the 3D schematics can help you save hours on jobs where every single detail does in fact matter. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process even smoother. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support lines. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use a promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That is SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. Go to supplyhouse.com where you can get with real people that provide real services. You thought we were done. Lee Corso says not so fast, my friends, because FanDuel's here to help you capitalize. Whether college football is going well for you or not, the NFL season is here to help. And FanDuel is going to give you an offer you cannot miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if it's a winner. That's right. You simply pick the bet, put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets used all across the app. It makes watching the games much more exciting because you have an investment level. Whether you're the casual fan or you like diving into the serious stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started, because FanDuel is the bee's knees for all of your betting needs, Parker.
I love the bee's knees line. I love that.
So now we get to roll into segment 2. And as you gave us the fluid segue into this, I don't know exactly what's going to happen at quarterback. We did bring in Noah Walters, who formerly spent 2 years at North Alabama, passed for almost 4,600 yards, had almost 900 yards rushing as well. But A, that's a very, very different level. B, he went to UCF and he was just a student for most of the last year. So he hasn't even really been involved with the football activities. Is it going to take him some time to understand the nuances of the offense? Absolutely. But clearly, we wouldn't have brought Noah Walters in if we thought Banks Bowen was going to be the answer. And Banks Bowen did get a little bit of play against Arizona. And the little bit we did see, the game speed seemingly was a massive problem for him. So it probably won't be Noah Walters. It maybe shouldn't be Banks Bowen, which leads us to the drum roll of the former TCU and Cal quarterback, Sam Jackson V. And if you watched any of the Baylor game, we purposely put him in the backfield to add different wrinkles, to give some eye candy to the defense. And not only did he scramble and hit some guys, he had a couple traditional drop backs as well. For whatever reason, we largely abandoned that format in the Arizona game, and it was a disaster. So, yes, we have Banks. Yes, we have Noah Walters. I think this should be a Sam Jackson game. Even if it's got to have some Trent Allen or Caleb Hicks and Wildcat with him, I think we need to spice up the backfield. We need to give you guys some eye candy. And Sam Jackson is the most adequate thrower of the football on the roster.
Well, and I mentioned going into the segue, but as someone who did some high school coaching, this could totally be, too amateur perspective. But when the roster gets decimated and you're losing guys and the transfers and the coaches, at some point, you just kind of want to make sure your best athlete catches the football every play. And what better way than to snap it to him? You see high school offense all the time that just snaps the best athlete in the team, let them figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would call him, as someone who follows them much closer than I, their best athlete. I do think he's their best athlete in a little bit I've watched at this position. And he gives them running options, obviously, with the legs. For the folks, in doing my own research here, correct me if I'm wrong, he did also play a year of receiver at Auburn. You mentioned quarterback at Cal and TCU at a high school. a year at Auburn as a wide receiver, and then came to y'all this past offseason. That's a lot of schools and a lot of experiences.
A little bit.
But Auburn doesn't just take Joe Schmoes at wide receiver either. He's got some boogie to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he started the season as our primary returner as well. I mean, matter of fact, the opening kick of the spring game, he took that thing all the way to the house, which showed us glimpses of athletically what he could do. And you mentioned him being at Auburn, being a receiver. But even on top of that, he was a receiver that they gave options to throw the ball. So I think that, in conjunction with what he did at TCU, the fact that he began the season as the Cal starting quarterback, and he started the first 5 games before he got injured, but he was off to a pretty good season. So he would have remained the Cal starting quarterback all season. And there's no telling what he would be now if he would have stayed at quarterback this entire time. And you mentioned it. Auburn doesn't typically bring dudes in unless they athletically know that they can be an SEC level contributor. And that's precisely what Sam Jackson was able to kind of show glimpses of at Auburn. And then he comes to Stillwater, and he was a return guy. He was a fourth wide receiver when we went to the slot. But now he's the best option, in my opinion, at quarterback. You are right. He's dynamic enough. Defensively, they have to respect the fact that he can and will throw the ball. And he has some traditional drop back capabilities that we saw at least a little bit of. I think we need to see more of it. And I also think we need more Wildcat with Trent Allen, right? Because that was another thing that was very productive against Baylor. And then we abandoned that against Arizona.
So obviously Houston's best receiver in terms of talent, I would argue, is Boogie, who you guys know very closely and well. So I don't mean to put salt in that wound or anything, but Stephon Boogie Johnson in his final year of college, having started his career at Oklahoma State, finally again, no one looked good on the offense against Texas Tech. So I don't want to act like that game didn't happen. But up until that point, he'd kind of been getting better each week. And he and Weigman had kind of gotten into more of a gel and groove over the course of the season thus far. When the biggest player to watch, though, is very literally the biggest guy in Tanner Koziol, 6'7", 6'8", depending on when you're looking at, 250-pound tight end. He is a pro. I don't know if he's a first round, a third round, or whatever. He's a pro. You just don't find many tight ends that are that big.
Yep.
I want to ask, are you going to safety? You think that they're going to bracket? What do you do with the 6'8" tight end? Because that seems to be the story every week, is if you can't match up one-on-one, you start to bend your rules a little bit, and that's when things go well for Houston anyway.
Well, I don't think we have an answer, Parker, because Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon absolutely torched us. Trigg, the big tight end at Baylor, we didn't have an answer for him. Arizona had effectiveness in both the wide receiver and the tight end game, pushing the ball down the field. So I don't think we necessarily have an answer. Athletically, the answer would be somebody like a Jacoby Oliphant, but he's going to give up 40, 50 pounds on a fairly regular basis. The objective is to eventually turn him into a linebacker, but he's not ready for that yet. And the coverage aspect is still somewhat new to him, especially at this level. I think we all have faith in guys like Trip White, the Ole Miss transfer, and Brandon Rawls, some outside linebackers. But with the roster being depleted to the levels that it is, I think you have to bracket it. I don't think you have much of another option. But what that does is open up Boogie. And you and I both know, right? Boogie Johnson circled this game the millisecond he decided to come to Houston. And Jason Queso-Brooks is in the same vein because he was our best PFF graded offensive lineman all last season. But for whatever reason, our coaching staff wouldn't let him play. So he knew he had the talent because he had the PFF grade showing that I'm better than the players that Oklahoma State's putting out on the football field. So both of those dudes are coming on a mission. That scares the absolute tar out of me, buddy. I'm not excited. I was hoping that maybe you guys had comparable. Okay, hoping you had injuries is the wrong terminology. I guess
appreciate
I was
you correcting that.
I mean, you get what I'm saying. I'm not wishing injury on anybody, but when you look at Oklahoma State's injury report, I was at least assuming that if Connor was out, we had a small chance. If Connor is playing and you have the full complement of the guys you just mentioned, plus Jason Queso-Brooks, it's not going to go well.
And I'm interested too. So Slade Nagel's offensive coordinator, he was the offensive coordinator at Tulane when Willie was there. He spent a year at LSU. He wanted to stay in Louisiana with some family stuff before coming over. And then luckily things opened up and he was able to come over pretty quickly. Um, he's a run first guy. Think about like Tulane and Tajay Spears and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
The running back guy right now has been Dean Connors, a Rice transfer that's been very dynamic. He's the kind of guy that, let's just be honest, looks like Cam Scatterbo and runs very differently. And and I think people maybe get their own judgment twisted there sometimes. But what guy on your defensive front is going to be kind of butting heads, so to speak, with Dean Connors the most?
Most likely it's going to be Wendell Gregory. The South Carolina transfer began the season with 3 sacks against UTM, largely disappeared for the Oregon matchup and for parts of the Baylor matchup. He finally kind of made his reemergence again against Arizona, which is why we had double-digit tackles or double-digit quarterback pressures. We had like 6 or 7 tackles for loss. We had like 6 sacks. That was the highlight of the defensive front this season, was that Arizona performance. Unfortunately, we still gave up 419 yards passing. So if you guys have the ability to take the top off of the defense, which unfortunately we've seen Boogie, we've seen some of the other wide receivers that you have at Houston this season, and that is a fear, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. If Wendell Gregory can create some havoc, then maybe we'll have some opportunities to get some turnovers in the back end. But if we don't get pressure on whomever you have at quarterback, yeah, it could be a very offensive-led day for you guys.
Well, not to keep being the segue guy, Cody, but if you're talking about pressure, it's hard to not think about Texas Tech and the Big 12. And I know we're going to get into that in just a second, so I'll save my thoughts on the rest of the weekend because it's kind of a...
You be the segue guy because I can neither spell nor ride one. So I greatly appreciate your segue capability. So let's segue this thing up, buddy.
But before we get to talking about the rest of the Big 12 and the weekend that is, it is an episode brought to you by Mazda, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Look, Cody's more of a veteran in the dad game than I am, but I got to say, as a dad that's trying to plug in a car seat to a car, that Mazda has more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of last August. Gives me a lot more confidence when driving a Mazda around. I also like that we're talking with Mazda because I actually drive a Mazda, so I feel like I can actually talk about that one some. But like players on Houston and Oklahoma State, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count and possibly becomes relevant, Mazda, move and be moved. And today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Quo, because Quo is one of the tools that can help make a huge a difference for your business owners. Formerly known as Open Phone, it's the same great business phone system you've heard us talk about for a long time at this point, just by a new name. And here's why it matters. Every single missed call as a business is money left on the table. When a customer conversation counts, you need to pick up the phone system. Our phone system is going to pick up for you and stay connected for 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communication. It works right through your app to your phone and computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline, etc. We've all been on the customer side of this, where you're just going through the Rolodex or the figurative Rolodex and finding who's going to answer the phone. With Quo, you make sure that you're answering every call. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started for free and 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. It's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. You got existing numbers with another service. Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls and no missed customers. Cody, this weekend in the Big 12, now I don't mean to act like this is a foregone conclusion. Last I saw, it was more than 2 touchdown spread with our buddies at FanDuel. And frankly, if this is a game where Oklahoma State is playing early in the morning at home, it may get spicy. I don't mean to say this one can't get spicy, but we were talking before the show, like there is a chance for some fun stuff to happen Saturday night in the Big 12 that could, kind of twist and turn AP polls even.
Yes, and we like to pretend that AP polls don't matter, and at the end of the day, they really don't. But they kind of also do, because that adds more intrigue from a national perspective on whether they're going to watch your ball games or not. Like the fans from our schools are going to watch the games, but what we're trying to do is allure fans from other schools to watch our games, and unfortunately, the number associated next to the name does in fact matter.
Yeah, and Texas Tech has the lowest of those numbers, which they tell me is a good thing.
Yeah.
Texas Tech is hosting Kansas for a big homecoming type of atmosphere. Texas Tech is undefeated, top 10 in the AP poll for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
I understand that they're really good. They just beat the brakes off Houston. So I don't mean to sound hypocritical in saying this. Jalen Daniels in that game feels a little spicy to me. I don't think I'm crazy there.
No, I mean, if there's somebody that is talented enough to be an absolute equalizer, it is 100% that guy. And the fact that it's a night game. That's the only thing that does give me some solace in Texas Tech playing this way, because even when they're not very good, a night game in Lubbock with all of the tortillas and the batteries and the alcohol that's flowing around, it's a difficult proposition for anybody. So it being a night game does give me at least a little bit of comfort in Texas Tech getting the dub. But Jalen Daniels is an equalizer. Their offensive creativity, maybe it's not any Kotelnicki levels, but it's pretty darn close. They can do more than enough to keep Texas Tech on their heels. And now that everybody has seen how good Tech actually is, I'm sure KU is going to add a bunch of wrinkles to, we talked about eye candy with Sam Jackson in the backfield earlier. I think that KU has more than enough versatility in the backfield to make some of that happen to at least keep the game close. But it's a night game in Lubbock, so probably Tech.
Yeah, when Weigman went out at the end of the second quarter, there was a drive where Houston actually scored a touchdown with the backup quarterback, Chris Gramillion, who is much more of a runner than a passer. And it looked like to me Tech went to the locker room at halftime and talked about how to deal with it and came up with a great game plan to stop it. But I will say that there were moments on that first drive like, oh, this guy can move a little bit. They were like, they were in trouble, And I wonder if Jalen Daniels can do that, even if they've got more time to game plan him. Y'all saw Arizona up close and in person. They host BYU and might have a better chance to pull off the upset than Kansas, though, because they're at home.
Not only that, man, that defense seems to be pretty for real. No Fafita, maybe not Teteroa McMillan levels, but he's a very adequate quarterback that has the ability to escape the pocket, to buy himself some time. His wide receivers are really, really good about making their numbers visible and getting back to the football, which makes it very difficult for anybody to stop. Offensively, they have talent, right? They have Ishmael Mahdi in the backfield. Noah Fafita does have a ton of athleticism. They've got enough receivers to make life difficult. But the biggest surprise to me was that defense. That defense is the real deal. And not only would I be surprised if they were able to pull this off, but I think BYU needs to be at least a little bit concerned.
Needs to be concerned. They have a freshman quarterback going against that defense on the road. Night game you mentioned, and all these, college towns. Houston's not quite a college town; it's a big city, but in college towns, there's just not as much to do during the day, right?
Yeah.
And so you're getting ready for the football game, and that's as nicely as we'll put it. They don't get ready for the football game in Salt Lake City at Utah in quite the same way. Or certainly not everybody does. I guess you can. The latest game might actually be the one that in Vegas and on the paper is the closest game in Arizona State and Utah. And I have been notably lower than the national average on both of these teams this year. I think Arizona State won a bunch of close games last year and then lost their best player. Why are we too high on them? I think Utah, it's like, show me what you've done in this conference. Show me yes, 3 years ago was 3 years ago, but it also was 3 whole years ago. Oklahoma State should know that as well as anyone, right? I think that this is two games. Like Utah probably needs this one, and they're at home, but they also play the Holy War in a week or two, and like you could talk about how that throws off the calculus. I don't know what to make of this, but I feel like people might actually watch this one more than the others.
No, I completely agree with you. People are going to be watching to see what Utah looks like because they have all this bravado. They have a returning talent. They did pretty good in the portal. Devin Dampier is one of the most, if not the most, athletic quarterbacks in the country. But, it's been somewhat underwhelming at times. Now, on the other side of the equation, Arizona State might be getting in a little bit of a groove. They've had a couple nice wins, a couple well-contested ball games that kind of, test their mettle a little bit. They do have a not so great loss, but I also think that they're very well aware of that. And I do think Arizona State gets this done because Bryce Eccles Stadium is not as wild as Utah fans like to present. Yeah, talking to you.
So if Utah takes another thumping, to quote the great Chris Level, if they take another thumping at home, can we stop hearing about them? Can they?
No, I do think I think if that happens, you're going to start hearing from Utah country that you already have a head coach in waiting. Like Oklahoma State got rid of Mike Gundy, so why can't we get rid of Kyle Whittingham? I think this is not necessarily a make or break game for Utah, but I do think that if they lose this game at home, there are going to start to be some of those, well, can Kyle Whittingham really do it in today's age of college football conversations?
And that's why the Big 12 is so great, because like we didn't even talk about Iowa State, who might actually be the most talented team in this conference. It's all said and done. They took a bad loss last week to Cincinnati, who we also didn't talk about as undefeated. Like I guess they're undefeated in conference play. They took a loss early in the season in a neutral site in air quotes, non-conference game. It's a fun conference to follow and a gigantic day of college football, and it's kind of nice that it's all on a Saturday, so you can just park in front of the TV, put the quad box on, and just sit.
Yeah, I think Iowa State needs this kind of a get-right game against Colorado. The purple people eater kind of matchup between TCU and Kansas State. I think TCU is a pretty good ball club that is going to be in the upper echelon of the conversation for who's going to represent the Big 12 in Arlington and beyond. And then lastly, you have UCF for Cincinnati. I will say this, man. Cincinnati actually looks for real. Like that loss to Nebraska is going to sting if they end up in Arlington, in my opinion. But I do think that they've proven Brendan Sorsby is significantly better. Whoever the quarterback coach is over there in Cincinnati, he might have more jobs lined up because you've seen a big difference in year 1 to 2 from Sorsby at Cincinnati. The offense seems to be humming. The defensive line was always an obstacle. Now they have some back-end guys to complement them. Cincinnati, I think, is going to be a problem for everybody.
Well, and so Houston and Cincinnati were in the American together for a while. Playing at Cincy is weird. It's just kind of a different environment than a lot of these other places are.
Yeah.
It's not quite Lubbock weird, but it's definitely weird in terms of just weird things happen in games there. And it makes for a fun day of college football. Now, we've got the Big 12 squad out later on Thursday, so we'll talk more about the conference with the whole crew there, Cody. What else, before we get out of here, what else you got locked on Oklahoma State this week? Because it's been kind of a tumultuous month for the Cowboys.
It has been, right? The coaching search obviously continues. The 30-day window for the transfer portal guys, I mean, there's only like 18-ish, 17-ish days left for them to make that decision. So it may not necessarily be a mass exodus, but we've already seen a couple of very surprising names that do buy into the Cowboy culture kind of thing. So the biggest storyline for Oklahoma State is going to be how many guys enter the portal and how integral were they going to be to this season or the future success of the Cowboys anyways.
I don't mean to be the one picking on programs losing their head coaches, but Houston has flipped one and is looking to flip a second guy that were committed to Arkansas, actually, before Pittman got fired up there. And I think that's an interesting story to watch for Houston this week as they get ready for the Cowboys this weekend. Obviously, we're previewing this matchup over Locked On Cougs too, but we're bringing you the Houston Cougars, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, each and every day live and breaking down things going towards this game this weekend. I think it will be a fun one. I got to admit, I'm hoping Houston gets back on track. Cody, best of luck to you. And again, a receiver quarterback does present some challenges that I hope Houston is ready for, and I'll put it that way.
I'm with you, brother, man. Yeah, dude, this has been great. I'm very glad that we were able to do this. Having the ability to watch Boogie and Jason Queso Brooks has been extremely fun for at least me. I can't speak for all Cowboy fans, but I've watched every Houston game this year just because A, I wanted to see if Connor was legit, and he is, and B, I just like watching Boogie and Brooks. That's why I watch all the KU games to see what Lyric Rawls does. And so I hate the transfer portal, but I do like to some degree that it gives a little bit more of an investment level for other teams. So while Oklahoma State is disastrous, my friends Falcons are undefeated, and I do like watching some of the former Cowboys, like Lyric at KU, like Boogie and Queso at Houston.
Makes for a fun sport. That's all for Locked On Cougs and Locked On Oklahoma State today. Again, find us wherever you get your podcasts, free and available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. Cody, I always wrap up with the Go Cougs. Y'all have a hand sign, I assume. It's like a gun or something, right?
We do. I say, God bless, go Pokes. Yeah, hit the like button if you liked it. All the podcasting people out here, You're everything that makes this work. Without you guys, we would be struggling to find ourselves. So we greatly appreciate you. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Go leave some reviews.